Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a chaotic scene in a bustling bank branch during the early days of the pandemic. The air was tense with stressed-out customers and heightened nerves. Among them was an elderly woman known for her unkempt appearance and frequent complaints. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like if you enjoyed the content, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a juicy story. I was on the clock, but not at the place smelly Karen was expecting. I used to work for a large financial institution in a very busy branch. At the beginning of the pandemic, this branch was even busier and customers were more cranky than usual. There was an older lady who always came in. She smelled horrible, had greasy hair, dirty clothes, and always complained. I was empathetic and tried to see the mental health issues behind her appearance, even though she would constantly complain about everything. Well, one day in the beginning of the pandemic, she came in to do her usual deposit, withdraw, check balance, too little, deposit more, check balance, I need cigarettes, withdraw some again, did that purchase post, did that check clear, need to go to the payday loan department, deposit everything I just withdrew, complain about something, huff and puff, blah, blah, blah. Well, after all of this, she waddles off with her walker and I call up the next customer. She turns around and says she has a question. The customer I just called up probably smelled her residual stench and said he can wait in line a little longer, so she waddled back over, flipped her walker around, and sat down. She proceeded to ask me how much stamps are. I said I wasn't too sure. She asked me why I didn't know, so I told her I bought some Forever stamps about a year ago and haven't checked since. She asked me again. I said I didn't know off the top of my head and can look it up. She said she didn't trust the internet, but she wants to know how much it'll cost to send a letter across the country. Again, I don't know. You'll have to go to the post office if you don't trust what their website says. She got really loud, so I did too. For a good 3 minutes, we were going back and forth, reminding her that she was in a bank, we haven't sold stamps in decades, and she needs to go to the post office to ask an employee there. She just wasn't having it. She ended up waddling off while huffing and puffing and chewed out my branch manager on her way out for not educating employees on current economical structures, whatever that means. Like, lady, I don't work at the post office. I work at a bank. I'd have better benefits and higher pay if I worked at the post office. WTF. Don't get me wrong, but OP shouldn't have to deal with a situation like this. That said, the woman they dealt with should never have been allowed to fall into such a state to begin with. They need help, but that kind of care is either unavailable, ineffective because of a lack of funding, or too expensive for most of us for privately operated facilities. And our second story. Ranch Cup Karen. Hey guys, so yesterday at work I had an encounter with a Karen. It's a bit of a long story, so buckle up, guys. I'm a delivery guy for a pizza franchise that pays significantly more than my previous barista job. When I changed jobs, I assumed that it would be smooth sailing from there. For a short period of time, it was. Friendly work environment, super chill boss, and to top it all off, the customers were absolutely pleasant. But with all jobs, you're bound to run into a Karen or two. My time came yesterday when a Karen came into our store. So one of my coworkers, who we'll name Steve for obvious reasons, and I were chilling out in the front of the store. Now where I work, the amount of business we get fluctuates, so while we'll be extremely busy one day, we'll be super slow the next. On this particular day, it was slow. Other than a singular delivery order and a couple of carry-out orders. So our boss comes into the store and, after seeing how slow it was, tells us to feel free to make food for ourselves. Steve and I are stoked since neither of us had eaten at all that day. Steve makes himself a medium pizza with cheese, and I make my own pizza, a medium with pepperoni and bacon. We both put our pizzas in the oven and wait. About 3 minutes after the pizzas go in, the front door of the store dings, signaling that a customer has entered. So right from the moment she walked in, I could tell that this wasn't going to be a pleasant encounter. She sauntered onto the store with the classic Karen hairstyle, a look on her face that said, "I'm better than you, and you know it," and who I assume was her teenage son in tow. So I look over at Steve, then back at her. Before I could greet her, she says, "I'm picking up an order for Karen. Make it snappy. I don't have all day." So I go over to the heat rack and find her order, that's when I saw on the receipt that the order hadn't been paid for yet. So I put the 2 pizzas that she ordered on the counter and told her the price. With a huff, she paid, and I thought that was the end of it. But no, when it comes to Karens, when you think it's over and done, they'll constantly find a way to continue. So the lady asked for an extra ranch dipping cup. Now, one of the rules we have about the dipping cups is that we're not allowed to give extra dipping cups to the customers for free. The only time the dipping cups are free is if they actually came with the order, which in this particular case they didn't. So I grabbed the ranch cup, put it on the counter, and tell her the price, which was literally a measly 69 cents. She looks at me and says, "Are you kidding me? You can't just give me the cup for free? You have plenty already." To which I responded with, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but no, I can't." Now, the one thing I've learned from all the other Karen-related stories that I've heard is that Karens absolutely hate being told no, for any reason. So when I tell her that I can't give her the cup for free, she started yelling and swearing, saying things like, "Are you going to charge me to use the bathroom too? Or maybe you're going to make me pay for extra napkins too?" At this point, Steve and I are getting pretty annoyed, and that's when my boss, who I found out later was actually the manager of corporate operations, comes in and asks what's going on. As we're explaining what's happening, the Karen suddenly goes completely off topic, talking about how our customer service was terrible. Then she mentions that she actually owns her own pizza restaurant where allegedly they make over 500 pizzas per day. I'm not sure if she was being truthful or just blowing smoke, but my boss looks over at her and, without skipping a beat, says, "Well, if you own your own restaurant, what the heck are you doing here throwing a hissy fit over a 69-cent cup of ranch?" The store got so quiet that you could practically hear a feather fall. I look over at the Karen's son, who's trying his absolute hardest not to laugh. Steve and I were containing our own laughter as well, so the Karen hurls more insults before grabbing her pizzas and leaving the store with her son. Steve and I share a laugh before going back to enjoy our pizzas. Later on that day, the store gets a call. It's the Karen's son apologizing for how his mother behaved earlier that day. He then explained that she's constantly doing that wherever they go. She loves causing drama and starting trouble for people. I tell him no worries and that I knew what her gameplay was the second she walked in. We chatted for a bit before saying goodbye and ending the call. So a bit of a happy ending to what was honestly a very amusing and slightly annoying encounter with the Karen. Love it when that entitled Karen got called out for her idiotic actions. But I'm wondering, is she going to be banned from your workplace and instead have her son, who's very chill, being allowed in? And our next story. My neighbor is stealing my water. I've been dealing with really low water pressure in my home in Scotland, UK. At first I thought it was just a minor plumbing problem, but when it didn't get better, I called the water company to check it out. What they found was shocking. The water company sent a technician to inspect my place, and they discovered that my neighbor had been using my water pipe without telling me. This unauthorized use was why my water pressure had dropped so much. I was both angry and confused about what to do next. I decided to take action right away. First, I documented everything. I saved all the information and evidence, including the communications with the water company and any reports they provided about the unauthorized use. This was important to have a clear record of what was going on. Next, I tried to handle it directly with my neighbor. I wrote them for a formal letter explaining the situation and asked them to stop using my water supply immediately. I hoped this would solve the problem, but my neighbor ignored my letter and kept using my water, which made things even worse. Realizing that talking to my neighbor wasn't working, I went back to the water company for more help. They suggested installing a separate water line for my neighbor to stop the unauthorized use. They also mentioned that I might need to take legal action to enforce this. Feeling overwhelmed, I talked to a solicitor. He recommended sending a cease and desist letter to my neighbor, which he helped me write. The letter explained the legal consequences of continuing to use my water supply without permission and demanded they stop immediately. I also thought about mediation to resolve the issue without going to court. A mediator could help us reach a fair agreement, but my neighbor was still uncooperative, so mediation didn't seem like it would work. With no other options, I reported the unauthorized use to the local authorities, including the council and a consumer protection agency. They took the matter seriously and started their investigation. Finally, after weeks of dealing with this mess, I got some good news. The authorities stepped in and ordered my neighbor to stop using my water supply immediately. They were also required to install their own separate water line to prevent this from happening again. Plus, my solicitor successfully negotiated compensation for the inconvenience and costs I had to deal with. In the end, my water pressure returned to normal with no more worries about low water pressure or troublesome neighbors. And our last story. The Farmer's Bridge. I'm a farmer, and my neighbor's also a farmer, an old man, one of the hardest working people I know. But he had one problem. He recently passed away and left all his property to his spoiled idiot son. The son was an alcoholic and possibly used stronger substances. He would do all sorts of crazy things, like driving his combine harvester drunk with girls who looked even more worn out by life than he did. Oddly enough, he somehow managed to work and keep the farm afloat, at least for a while. Apparently, he inherited something good from his father. So there are 2 roads leading to my house. One short one over an old wooden bridge, and a second one 5 times longer to get to the nearest town and bypass the marshy area. I raise chickens, ducks, geese, and rabbits, and the bridge is quite enough to support my loaded pickup truck, so I constantly use the bridge, and when I need to bring a big truck, I take the long way round. One day, while I was sitting on my porch drinking beer with my friend, I saw the idiot neighbor again driving his combine harvester in the evening. I thought he wanted to do some work, but he started spinning around his field where the harvest had already been collected, and then turned towards my bridge. He was very lucky that the bridge collapsed as soon as he drove onto it, so the combine didn't fall from a great height, and the idiot wasn't badly hurt. With shouts and curses, he got out of the overturned combine by the time I even ran to him. He looked around to see if anyone was nearby. He definitely looked at me, but apparently he was so drunk that he took me for a tree or something like that and ran, crouching, home. My friend and I stood there with our mouths open, not knowing what to do, until my friend said, "Well, let's finish our beer and call someone." I said, "Okay," and we went back to the porch. But about 20 minutes later, the police arrived on the other side of the bridge. The officer started shouting and waving at me as he could clearly see me on the porch. I shouted, "Officer, you need to go around the long way to talk to me." The officer shouted something, spat, got into his car, and drove off. Apparently, he didn't want to wade through the marsh to me, just as I didn't want to go to him. Half an hour later, he arrived at my place via the long road and started shouting, "What the hell did you do?" It turned out that the neighbor ran home, called the police, and said that I had stolen his combine and drowned it in the marsh, and before that, I beat him up. I said that my friend and I had been sitting here the whole time since lunch, and my wife, her sister, and their grandmother could all confirm it, and then we told him what we saw. After that, the officer drove back around, and as I learned later after checking the facts, he arrested the neighbor. The neighbor had almost 7 parts per thousand of alcohol in his blood, and I didn't even know one could survive that. He had to sell the farm to pay for rebuilding my bridge and to pay the fine. A completely dumb story about a completely dumb neighbor. I heard he bought a house and an HOA in the neighboring town. Well, let him enjoy it. Lived without fear and went to the HOA without fear. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.